before I get on to the main topic. A number of people asked me some very intelligent questions last week after the talk. And one or two really were on mark. And what they had to do with was the following. Was everything so peachy keen in Poland the way we described it last week? That's always an excellent question to ask in any kind of history context, because any book only gives you one side of it, by definition. And indeed, there's an entire literature of social criticism by rabbis and others of Jewish life in Poland. So, as is often the case, you can present the glass as being half full and you can present it as being half empty, and both are true. The situation of the Jews in Poland, the Golden Age, did exist certainly. And the basic description that you find in the Yevei Mitzvah is accurate. However, as you can imagine, there were the ins and the outs, the people, the haves and the have-nots, those who benefit from the system, those who do not benefit from the system, and any system that's out there is liable to misuse, corruption, and all kinds of other things like that. And this is not a course I'm giving here tonight or a series of lectures on the Golden Age of the Jews in Poland. If it were, which is not what we're doing, then I would try to deal with that more fully. The very famous educational critiques of the Maharal and the Kli Yakar and the Zeraberach, have you ever heard of him, and people like that, who really tear into the faults as they see them of Jewish society. Surprise, surprise. However, as I say before, even if the glass is half full, that's pretty doggone impressive. So I share that with you because someone could very easily do the following. You could read two accounts of the Jewish community of Baltimore in the year 2010. And one account would read like this. This city was thriving with Judaism and Yiddishkeit. You walk down the street of Park Heights on a Saturday morning, you see dozens of synagogues and minyans and parents and children thronging all over the place. And there's Hashkama minyans and there's seders and all kind of things are going on. And afterwards there's a whole network of groups and do-gooder groups and all of which is perfectly true. And someone would then conclude Baltimore, Maryland, in the year 2010 was a total bastion of ultra-orthodoxy and the highest piety and all the rest. Another person could write a description about the Jewish community of Baltimore, Maryland, which would read as follows. Saturday morning, everybody's in the mall, or sleeping, or at the gym. There's zero Jewish content going on whatsoever, and everybody likes it that way. There's mass intermarriage, to complete ignorance of Judaism. No one can read Hebrew, no one's even interested, and everybody goes their merry way as the community shrinks and goes into a slow euthanasia. And that would also be an accurate description of Baltimore Jewry in the year 2010. But then someone will say, how can they both be true? I'm reading this and I'm reading that. Somebody's got to be lying, unless we fall back to what we talked about last week and the week before, the dialectic. Right? And then you'd say, this is partially true, this is partially true. There are two Jewish communities in Baltimore. And for one, it's like this Saturday morning, one it's like that. And then you'd end up with a higher understanding of the overall picture. So in order to do Polish Jewry justice, we'd have to do it that way. But I don't have the time. And that's not seriously, that's not what we're here tonight. We want to focus on a subject which by itself could take 20 lectures without being, exaggerating. So I'm going to try to crunch it into the little time that we have. And I just want to share with you as we go into this. Professor Norman Davies has his class. He writes the classic books on Poland. From England, he's a lover of Polish, and nothing changes. The king of Poland here in this golden age, King Sigmund August, is complaining to the Bishop of Krakow, "Tell me, my Lord Archbishop, since you do not believe in sorcery, how is it that only 16,000 Jews pay the poll taxes, while 200,000 Jews apparently live underground?" Notice there, a lot of people are not paying their taxes. A lot of people are not reporting their income. I know such a thing doesn't happen in the United States, but I'm just trying to share with you the way things look like a couple hundred years ago. Now, we're going to be talking about the big uprising and turns into a major war that occurs in the year 1648 over here. Here is a map of Europe, as you can see in 1648. Here I share with you because it's very colorful, it's easy to see. Here's Poland, the large country over here. As you can see, Poland extends from this end to this end where I'm pointing at right now, obviously, is the extreme eastern part of Poland, what you and I today call Ukraine. The key element to understand over here is the following, that this period, Ukraine, is obviously the border area, the buffer between this and this. On the left hand, where I'm pointing at this moment, is the Christian area of Poland and Europe. On this area, all the way on the right, is what they call the Khanate of the Crimea, and the Muslim area, the Ottoman Empire. This is the area of the Muslims. There's constant wars between A versus B and B versus A. This is the area where most of the battles happen, and the word Ukraine means a buffer zone. So that's what it was. Poland long ago tried to conquer this and then tried to settle it in order to create a buffer zone from these guys, these Tartars, that they shouldn't be able to advance and raid all the way into Poland. As I said before, we know down till the very present day, wherever the Muslims are, you're going to have wars. You're going to have border wars. Just get used to it. And that was true in that time. And every year, the Muslims raided the Christians and vice versa. And what happened was the Poles had settled over long periods of time. Farmers, they tried to persuade them to, form settlements here and people should live there. With the idea being, if there's a population, then the Muslims won't come in and settle it, a little bit like Israel has with the Shtachim and the settlements today. And that's the beginning of the Ukrainians, as we call them. And the only type of person that's willing to homestead in a situation like that is your tough and hardy types, because you know you're going to be raided from time to time, so you have to be made of stern stuff. And therefore, the Ukrainian people that I'm talking about, the people of the borderland, are going to have to be a hardier stock. And how are you going to deal with the constant raids? They more or less split 50-50. I'm dumbing all this down to make it easy for you to understand. And one group would be the farmers, the other group would be the shomrim. These are guys who'll ride around and try to protect the farms, and if they don't, at least they can raid and punish the other side. That's the Cossacks. You understand? The shomrim, so to speak, the people that emerge out of this, who therefore are wild and, by definition, border fighters, and it's no quarter given, dog eat dog. The Muslims come in and terrorize and burn and rape and pillage and loot and all this, and they do the same when they have a chance. And that's how life is lived. And so Vildachai is. Now, Poland wants them to serve their purpose of being a buffer force, but on the other hand, the Poles are always afraid that these guys make it too big and powerful for their britches, and one day make a country be a threat to Poland. And so the Poles, trying to be very cynical about this, they said, these are like your fingernails. You have to cut them every once in a while. They grow too long. That's the famous expression of the Polish king, which means that the Cossacks have to be taken down a peg or two lest they get too big and powerful. And so on the one hand, you want them to be wild and Vildachayas and go fight on your behalf and raid the Tartars and the Muslims. The other hand, you want them to get too big and powerful. So there was constant fights all through the 15 and early 1600s. What exactly should be the relationship between the Kingdom of Poland on the one hand and these Cossacks on the other, who are sort of subjects of Poland but aren't really. As time went on, especially in the early 1600s, the great landowners of Poland tried to stick their noses over here because it was virgin territory to take over. I might remind you that the Ukraine is the best soil in the world, better than America. It's a tribute to the idiocy of communism that they had the best karka in the world for growing anything, and they still had to import food. You understand? It's incredible. I remember this from when I was in elementary school or something like that. They got the best topsoil and things like this. So it's a very productive area if you know what you're doing with it. And therefore it was tempting for the great magnates, the great landowners from Poland and Ruthenia, this area over here, to try to take it over, and therein lies the tale. They more or less were doing this as the 1600s went on, the late 1500s, 1600s. And what this means basically in simple terms is that you have some rich and powerful Polish nobleman who sees a piece of territory, there are people inside of it, and he more or less comes and says, I own this now, and I want to turn it into money, because that's the point, and now I'm sending my Jew in to run it for me. Okay? And we have records and documents and things like this, and that's what happened. So you have a Jew or two or three that did come in what they call an arrenda, which is a lease, and basically it's like this Shmerel or Beryl, that was their names. Or Yankel or Zachariah, this is your forest. This is your area. We have documents which say for the next 300 miles, everything in it, the behemoths and the peasants, that's how they used to write it, all belong to you, meaning to use for me. And the idea is that I, the nobleman, calculate that, these lands should bring in, I'm just making this up, bring in an income of $5 million a year, so you undertake for the lease to give me $5 million up front. That's the idea, and then whatever you make over that, you keep, and or some variation on that arrangement, and that's how business was done. Now, the type of person I'm talking about is going to say like this: how can I earn my $5 million and then make my profit? So you're going to tax everything you possibly can. For example, you're going to set up bars and toll posts, and taxing the mills when you grind the food, and tax the churches. And so when there's a christening and a baptism and a burial and things of this nature, and the keys of the church will be in the hand of the Jewish agent of the nobleman, so that nobody can get in unless they pay the taxes beforehand. You're creating a firestorm. You understand? If you add to that the fact, if we went to add more oil, more gasoline, if you add that the fact that the Polish nobles are Catholic, and the Cossacks and the Ukrainians are Greek Orthodox, then you can't come up with a more perfect storm, can you? Now, why would a Jew do this? You got to make a living. But on the other hand, what kind of a Jew does this? And the answer is a tough customer, right? A tough businessman who's got to be made to some degree or other of stone, but who also is going to bring in, because a Jew doesn't want to live by himself, relatives and friends to make a Jewish community. But the whole community is going to really be dependent, in a broader sense, on Reichman over here, or Rothschild, or whoever the rich guy is. You understand? He will have his friends and relatives man the estate, bar, the taverns, or as I say, the mills, or things of this nature. He might have some of these yeshivas that he'll maintain, like we talked about last week. This is the underside of it. What's the economic basis of this golden age? Sometimes he will have other friends who will be the agents, who will know how to turn the local produce into an exportable product. I'll give you an example. They might have a forest. So this guy will get the peasants to chop the forest down as slave labor for the Lord. And then his cousin or friend will know how to, he knows somebody who knows somebody who knows how to transport this stuff to the river. And he has another guy over there who knows how to slip it all the way up the river here, up to the Baltic Sea. And from there, they might transport it, because he knows another guy, to Denmark or to England or even to Spain or Portugal or Italy to use for building ships or whatever they want it for. And that way, the nobleman, if he wishes, can spend all the time in the casinos in Warsaw or Krakow or places like that. And he knows that his business is being seen to by somebody who has to pay him on January 1st $5 million anyway. And if the guy doesn't produce, you can get rid of him and find another Jew. Right? So this is how life was lived. But as I say, it means that the Jew is in the middle of a powerful, what should I say, complex of ethnic hatreds, religious hatreds, political, feudal, in every regard. And these guys are afraid that the Poles will one day turn them into animals, as I say before, and plow them in the fields. And the Yevei Mitzvah, which is the Jewish famous account of it, he says, he has the leader saying to him, he said, you better watch out what's going to happen, otherwise, it's not enough that these princes, the Polish magnates, dominate us and enslave us. The lowest people in the world, namely the Jews, are also over us. And that means we're really the dirt of the dirt. It's bad enough to be dominated by a Polish nobleman, but to be dominated by a Jew and told when you can open the church by a Jew, by a Christ killer, is unbelievably contemptuous. Hayom osli zeh davar. If they do this to us today, then l'machar yasu gam ken kadavar zelachem. This will happen to everyone else. And the end of the process is they'll plow with us in the field, taking the place of the animals. We're already can't get lower than you are with a Jew giving you orders. Okay? So the point is that the Ukrainians had complaints, right? And they were valid complaints. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to understand where this came from. It wasn't simply that one day somebody get up and said, like, let's go kill the Jews. They were unfortunately, objective economic reasons that caused it, which is why Ad Hayom Hazeh, the Ukrainians look at this uprising as a glorious thing, and they don't care about the fact that the Jews were hurt. They said that's collateral damage, but the bottom line is we were saving ourselves from a fate worse than whatever. You understand? So it's pretty bad. The thing is that the Cossacks had tried to make some kind of stand against Poland repeatedly in the past, and each time they were crushed. So in 1635, there was a big famous thing and they broke the guy on the wheel. You know what I mean? The head guy, they literally cracked him in half in Warsaw. And these guys played rough. That's the point I'm trying to say. It was not the right time for a nice Jewish boy to be there, but they were. And what it took was a leader. And without a leader, you don't go anywhere. History is famous for showing us that you never get a leader from the poor and the oppressed. You actually have to have somebody from the upper classes who identifies with the poor and the oppressed, and then uses his education and his elite status to place himself at the head of the poor and oppressed, and then becomes their king. So that's what happened over here, unfortunately. Meaning the Cossacks could complain and borcha around for years and years and years, but it wouldn't lead to anything until they found somebody who could organize them. And this person was this guy over here, who we'll see in the movie in a minute. Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who, as you see the years over there, who is the George Washington of the Cossacks. Right? For us, he's the Adolf Hitler, but for them, he's the George Washington of the Cossacks. And that's his throne of office after he became like their sort of king. And he was a charismatic fellow. He was a captain or a colonel even in the Cossack regiments, and he was like a shtickle, like a minor Polish noble. Meaning he went to college, Jesuit college. He had an education. That's the point. So he really was a member of the elite, but he was an alienated member of the elite, and therefore he knew how to express his alienation by placing himself at the head of a national movement, sort of helping to create this national movement, and then leading it. Okay? And in the whole variety of sources out there that tell us how he personally was hurt. Some say his wife was taken off by a Polish nobleman. Some say his kid was killed by them. Here it is a whole story in the Yevei Metsula where, you know, he was always plotting against the Poles, and some Jew told a Polish guy that he's out to get you, and they locked him up with some other Jew who was a friend of his. Yehudi Echad, Be'er Shmo Yaakov Sobolenki, Hoya Ov Osha Khmelnytsky, V'noslo Esa. He gave him advice when he was locked up to have the other nobles give their word, the other Cossack leaders give their word to let him out to go to church on Sunday or something like that, and then he skedaddled, you see? And so you see already beforehand that some clever people saw that he's a real danger. Nevertheless, they were not able to do what they should have done, which was shoot him in the head up front. And therefore, he got out and he got away from them, and he was able to go back. Let's take a look at the map again real quickly. He was able to flee from his jail where the local Polish nobleman had locked him up here, all the way out here to the edges of this area where it was really lawless. The Cossacks were running around, and he said, gather to me and I'll explain to you why you're being persecuted and how we can do something about it. And he was charismatic enough to organize them, and he did do so. And his tactic was very simple. Throughout history, this was the Christian part, this was the Muslim part, these guys are fighting them, and those guys are fighting these. That's just who it was. The Cossacks forever had been the heroes of the Christians fighting against the Muslims. Right? That's who they were. He said, why should we do that? Why don't we hook up with these guys against the Poles? That's all. Right? Why should we keep fighting them for the Poles? Let's hook up with these guys for the Poles. Let's make an alliance with them. We'll make a big raid into Poland. And more or less, you guys keep the metaltlin and we get the karka. That's the deal they made. Anything that's movable, gold, silver, slaves, things like that, you guys get to keep. And the land we will keep. It's a very simple kind of deal. He made this offer to the Cossack, to the Khan of the Crimea, the Muslim ruler of the Tatars, this Islamic area. Made very basic sense, and so they hooked up, and then was all the trouble. Then was all the trouble. So the war that we're talking about is a combination of one Christian group plus a Muslim group against a Catholic group. That's what it is, and that gave them a lot of extra power, and it was and both sides are savage because they're the ones that have been doing most of the fighting for a long, long time. Now, to show you how volatile the situation is, without going into too many details, one of the reasons this broke out was because these guys were all planning to join with the Poles in a big raid into here, and everybody was thinking of getting their loot and their booty and things like this. At the last minute, the King of Poland called it off, which meant these guys were all dressed up with nowhere to go. They gathered all their weapons and things like this. and they had big plans, and then it was called off. So they were all in an angry mood anyway, which he was able to exploit. So look at this nutty situation I'm describing. They're all getting ready to join in one big Christian thing against the Muslims. Then it was called off, so the Christian group hooks up with the Muslim group to attack the other Christian group. All this would be funny to us if not for the Jewish side of things. Right? So what happens is that around Hanukkah, he says over here, and this is written, when I'm reading you in Hebrew, is an eyewitness account written by Nathan Hanover, who, as I mentioned last week, Hascholas Mirdam Haylifnei Purim, that the whole thing started around Purim time, which means you're talking about February, March of 1648. That's when he started to agitate, but it doesn't reach its fullness. Little by little, he's gathering people until around just before Shavuos, in May of 1648. And what happens is you have a terrible May and June, and that's when I'm going to have time to talk about today. And next time I hope to do the rest. The Poles immediately gathered their local forces to attack him, and he defeated them at the battle at Zhovtivori, which is someplace in the Ukraine, in May 16th of 1648. That's the 24th of Iyar, meaning it's just before Shavuos. Is that correct? 2 weeks before. I want you to keep a track of this. So they had their first encounter. The Cossacks won, and that was unusual because the Poles had a professional army, or at least they thought they did, and they got taken down badly. And then, to make things worse, 4 days later, after this defeat, back here in Warsaw, the king died. And they didn't get another king till November. So for the next 6 months, Poland is officially without a king. They had a regent, but there was no king, because remember, they had to elect one. This was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Republic of Nobles, where they didn't want a dynasty. Every time a king dies, they all got to get together. And if you think the elections here in Baltimore for the rabbis are complicated, you ain't seen nothing yet. The Polish system was very complex, and money changed hands and things of this nature. I know you're all shocked. And so it wasn't until 6 months till they got a new king. So it's the worst possible time for it to happen, right? Just when the rebellion broke, and just when they defeated the First Army, the Poles are without a head, which meant that all the nobles and the magnates in this area over here were left on their own, which is a very significant part of our story. 6 days later, when Erev Shavuos, came the great Battle of Korsun. Do we have that on here? There's the king who just died, and there's the new guy who comes in November. So he was a warrior, but he didn't, as you can see by the fact he's wearing armor. But he's not even the king until 6 months after it started. And he was a priest, and he had to marry his brother's wife, and it was a whole ganze shit till he got his act together, until he could organize an army. Took another couple months. It was really, really tough. The Poles were, really were Polacks on this occasion. Well, it was true. Go on. That's it. Okay, I was going to show you. He has over there, on Erev Shavuos, the Poles took a big defeat. They led this big army, led by their two big princes, Prince Koniec Polski and Potocki. These are big names over there. And they just walked into a trap, and they got, the Poles had the famous cavalry, which they had the best cavalry, heavy cavalry, and the hussars, they used to call them. And the only thing is, Khmelnytsky was no dummy. He maneuvered them that they should charge in an area where there was a lot of mud, and it didn't work. And then they fell down in puddles and holes that the Cossacks had done for them, and they destroyed the Polish army over there. So this was even worse. When this happened, then it's real trouble for the Jews, because when this battle took place around over here in Korsun in the Ukraine, and here where I'm pointing right now with my finger is the big river that separates the Ukraine on the one hand from the rest of Poland, the Dnieper River. And so anybody who was on this side of the Dnieper, there's no Polish army anymore. There's no law and order. It's totally under the Cossacks. And they're coming everywhere, and they're going to out for blood, and they're going to kill every Pole and every Jew that they find. If they're not going to kill them, they're going to kill them. And then what do you do? And so as I said before, this happened on Erev Shavuos. It didn't take long for word to get out that the Polish army had a tremendous mapola. All the Jewish communities and the Polish in the area, 30, 40, 50 miles around, whatever, immediately heard the news. And this hit on Shavuos, and as you'll see over here, he has an eyewitness description over here, better than anything that I can do, where he says that HaYehudim shemitzad haNar Dnieper, all the Jews on the wrong side of the river. Shamu elu shnei maros b'yom rishon shel Chag HaShavuos. The news of the two defeats of the Polish army arrived on Shavuos. Just imagine this. One morning, so everybody stayed up all night, right? But you can't go to sleep in the morning. And they said the Cossacks are coming. They're a few miles away. Just get up and run. There were no cars. Get on a horse. Do whatever you can. Get the heck out of there. And it was Yontif, but it doesn't matter. It's really Bikuch Nefesh. And they forgot all their gold and silver, all their wealth. And they literally flee to save life. Where do you flee to? You can't. Most of them are not in a position to run away and cross the river and get to the other side. Some did, but you run to what's closest. After all, I'm talking about walking. They didn't have cars. Some people may have horses. You have a family. You have kids. You have parents. You have young, old, middle. You can't just tell everybody, get up and run. You understand what I'm saying? Think about what I'm talking about. How do you do that? And the Cossacks are coming and they have horses and who knows what. They're light cavalry. And so the Jews run wherever they can, usually to fortified places. The Poles had castles and forts all over the place, and one would think that these would be safer. Called Glilas Kak Otstra Vakilas Hashayachas Lahem. All the communities in the district of Ostra, which was one of these big communities over there in that area, and he lists off all their names. Chudnov and Lubertov and Stalov and all the Baruch Tzas, Lepolnoa. Some of them ran to Rabbi Oberstein's town, to Polnoa, which had a fortress, Zaslav, and to the fortress in Zaslav, and some to Constantine, Kihem Hoyu, Makomas Chazokis Kedolas. These were big fortified places. V'chol Glilas Kak Lvov, Medinas Russia, and all these areas that near Lvov, the famous Lemberg, ran away to Nemirov. That was a mistake. Nemirov was a big fortress also. Baruch Lekak Nemirov, Usviv Kak Tulchin, Baruch Lekak Tulchin. These are names we're going to be coming across tonight. Nemirov and Tulchin. I know they're not household names in Baltimore, but they were big names over there. And these are powerful fortified cities, and he has other places as well. Those are the lucky ones. Those are the ones who got away. The ones who didn't get away were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whoever didn't flee or wasn't able to. I mean, in the situation I'm describing, where does an old person go? The old person says like this, you go, I can't go. I'm going to hold you back. Right? Meaning, there's 1,000 tragedies that cannot be spelled out, that have to be compressed into a sentence, that you just have to realize on your own. Right? And whoever didn't flee, Dama Barosho, their blood was on their head. In other words, whatever happened to them was their own fault. And all these communities on the wrong side of the river, Dnieper, we were close to the battle. Kagan Kak Preslav and Barishkova and Pratin and Barshabali and all these, Luba and Lachovitz, all these names. Nergu al Kiddush Hashem, they were all wiped out on Kiddush Hashem. And Bemisus Meshunas Kashus Umars, with all kind of horrible deaths. They weren't just killed, they were killed. Kitsosam, Pashtu, these are the Cossacks and the Tatars, who were among the most savage fighters in the world. Some of the victims, they ripped off their skin and threw the skin to the dogs to eat while you watch. And some of the Jews, they chopped off their hands and their legs, and they threw the rest of the body onto the road, and they rode over them in wagons and horses in order to crush them to death. And some of them were even more exquisite tortures. They inflicted all kind of wounds on them, but they're expert. These guys know the human body very well in a savage way. So they gave them all kind of wounds, slow death. Enough to kill you, but slowly. Now we'll see the Poles did the same thing to them. So they wounded them mortally, but it'll take a long time. And then they threw them out, in order that they should not die quickly. And they should slowly expire while their blood, whatever. They buried many people alive. They shechted children while the mothers were holding them. They took a lot of kids and tore them to bits like you do fish. All these pregnant women, they tore their stomach open. And they took out the babies and smashed them in front of the children. The Nazis, by the way, did the same thing, or to be more exact, the Ukrainians did the same thing in 1941 and 1942, if you take the trouble to look up the facts of the Holocaust. We have pictures of it if you go to the the museum. And some of them, they did things that's mind-boggling. They tore the belly open. They put in the women. They put in a live cat. They sewed it back up. But tafra bet, and the kids would bring it, Glenn chopped off their hands. So you see a chayim in a bed, and so they shouldn't be able to do anything and die this way. These are sick dogs. That's who they were. V'talu hayalodim bedadei mosam. They hung their babies on the mother's breast. And they hung them both together. And they hanged them. And they took children and roasted them on fire like a barbecue. They and brought them to the mothers to eat them. Or they took kids, who were Jewish kids, and they made them bridges, pile one over the other, and turned them into human bridges to ride over them. In other words, you can't think of anything they didn't think of. Hitler didn't need to learn any tricks. This is all out there back in the 1600s. Now let me tell you something. This was standard prep. For us, deservedly so, we're shocked. I'm sure we all are. This was standard procedure in these wars they had all the time. You understand? When you have a civilization and culture where for hundreds of years, A attacks B and raids them, and B attacks A, and there's no quarter shown, and everybody comes up with new ways, you have savagery and savagery and savagery, and they're drunk, and they're lowlifes, and they're this and that and the other. So this is the fate of those who did not escape. There was nothing they didn't try. And everything that they talk about in the Gemara, skila, sreif, herg, v'chenek, stoning, burning, and all these things they came up with. Many the Tartars captured, and we'll see they were, so to speak, the lucky ones. Why were they the lucky ones? The Tartars, who were more savage than the Cossacks, had a different attitude. They were here strictly for business. When they captured anybody, it's a business proposition. Now, if probably it's an old person, old lady, something, you probably killed them for fun, because you're not going to get any money out of them. But maybe not. No, we have records of this. But anybody who's not old, or who can persuade them that they have relatives or something like that, or that there's some Jewish community somewhere, which there was, let's say in the Muslim area or in the Turkish Empire, there were Jewish communities, so you'll get pidyon and shuvi money, then they won't kill you. It's just strictly business. If it's fun, it's fun. If it's business, it's business. This was the deal, that whoever the Tartars capture, they get to keep as slaves for money. Later on, a couple years later, there was a big battle between the Cossacks on the one hand, another battle, and the Poles on that one. And the Tartars captured 8,000 Polish prisoners, and the Cossacks wanted to kill them. And the Tartars said, sure, but pay us. And they did. And then they killed them. So this is the system of honor that you're dealing with over here. There were unbelievable number of rapes, of married women, unmarried women. They did in front of their husbands. No, this is a degradation thing. And all the beautiful young women were taken to be slaves, shivchos, ophos, to work in the kitchen, in the kitchen of a Cossack family, of a Tartar family. And a lot of them ended up being, in the harem, concubines, things like that. This is what they did to everywhere that they reached. Okay? All the villages and towns where the Cossacks caught up with anybody, bad news. Not only the Jews, they did the same thing to the Poles, because they hated them too. And so if you were a Pole or a priest or something, that's exactly what they did. They had it especially for the Catholic clergy, who, in other words, they tortured in ways I haven't even described yet, nor do I intend to. And therefore, as a result, thousands and thousands of Jews were killed in all kinds of terrible ways. And a lot of Jews, hundreds of Jews, he says, converted, for obvious reasons. Because one interesting thing over here is that if you converted, you could save your life. And so the people I'm describing, as we'll see repeatedly, who died these horrible deaths, did so because they didn't want to convert. Right? You could get out of it. V'sifrei Toros, Karla Kroim. You can imagine what they did to all the Sefer Torahs. They tore them to shreds. V'asmim Sakim and all the Degleim, L'Ragleim. They use them for shoes, shoe leather. I'll tell you again, this is a blueprint for Hitler. everything we're talking about over here, but happened not in 1940, but in 1648. Where Ritzui tefillin lochu lichroch sabar glam, and they used the tefillin straps for shoelaces. Uksutzei tefillin hishlichu barosh kol chutzos, and wherever you walked all over the Ukraine, you could see trashed tefillin, thrown out in the street all over the place. You understand? As a sign of contempt, just threw all over the place. Mishar Sifrei Kodesh Osug Shamber Ruchavasayim, and they took Hebrew books and used them as to cover the streets. Remember, you're talking about Poland where it's muddy in the winter. in the rainy season. So you have like little things to walk on. So you walk on Gemaras. Reminds us a little bit, perhaps, of what the Jordanians did with the Jewish cemeteries back in our time. And some of them they used literally as cannonballs. You take a whole bunch of the paper and use them to shoot out over there. Asher kol shemeh tatzilin oznav, or maybe means better use is the old muskets. I'm not an expert on this, but the old muskets have to have like a little powder thing with in paper that you put in. Remember that with the flintlocks and all that. So they used them for that. The point is that they completely went after anything Jewish with a vengeance and with a hatred such as the Jews had never experienced. What I'm describing over here, as far as I know, never happened before. Right? This did not happen in the Crusades. This did not happen in the persecution such as there were by the Muslims or other places like this. I've heard of inquisitions and I've heard of various types of persecutions, but this kind of extraordinary savagery, which to them was standard operating procedure, was new to the Jews. And he says over here that what happened was that some Jews, seeing what's going on around them, said like this: so let's run to the Tatars. You understand? In other words, here come the Cossacks, and on the other hills, the Tatars, let's run to them. At least we'll survive. Vahikashir Shamu Kak Prohibich, and Zyotyov, and Bazivka, and Tetyov, Agape, and there's all these communities I just mentioned who were in the area. Mashosa Hayavonim, Lachinish Neper, where they heard what the Yavonim, the Cossacks, here they call them the Greeks because they're Greek Orthodox. They're not Greeks. When they heard what they were doing, they saw that they were being attacked by a joint force. The Cossacks on the one side, the Tatars on the other. They said, if we wait for the Cossacks, then we're really in trouble. Let's go to the Machane HaKedar B'Shivya, Ki Adanu, because we know, Achenu B'nei Yisrael Shebekonstantinu kills Turkey, Rachmanim Gedolim Hain. Because we know that if we're captured by the Tatars, in the Arab lands, in Turkey, there are a lot of Jewish communities who are Rachmanim, B'nei Rachmanim. They will understand the pity and Shavuyim, and they'll get us out. V'yiftu son of Abaman, and they'll redeem us. It won't happen. Listen, that's also tough. You're talking about it several years. You understand? They actually used to arrest them and gather them over here and kill some of them and then send the others down the river to here and then ship it off over here. So it won't be easy. But at the end of the tunnel, there's light. B'chein also, hocha arba kilos anal anoshim noshim v'taf shlosh alofim nefashos. So imagine the picture. All these communities, 3,000 families, went towards the Tatars from these four communities. And they had a chazan like Yosef Rosenblatt, Shmo Reb Hirsch Mizyotov, Kishabal Kedorim Hiskil Lakoni L'Shur Il Malarachamin. And he led them, and he was singing as he came close to the Tatars in Malarachamin, which is, of course, for death. Al Harigas Achin V'Kol Gadol, and he was thinking about all the other Jews that they saw who were being slaughtered. Go call him B'Chil Gedola. And naturally, this led all the 3,000 families to cry like babies. And the author says like this: in Shemayim they must have heard this cry, because the Tatars then, acted positively towards them, and they said, "Don't cry. What are you worried about?" And the Tatars, who were more savage than the Cossacks, said to these Jews, Al Tidagu, what are you worried about? We're going to give you what to eat and drink. We got animals. It'll be kosher food. You got shochtim. Here's some animals. Shechted. Shachtim botzana bakal rov. Eat whatever you want. And we're going to send you down to Constantinople to the slave market. What do you care? We'll get our money back for whatever food you eat. Don't worry about that. Charity, business to business. And he goes on to say that this is what happened, that when they eventually got to Turkey, the Jewish communities, the Sephardim, ransomed 20,000 people, he says. Bizbazu alim harbit, he spent a fortune, obviously. This was their response to the Holocaust of the 17th century. And what do you got? They got him out, and then afterwards, after they got him out of the slave market, then they have to supply him with parnosa, and then you have to supply him with some kind of wherewithal to go back to Poland. So I mean, just think of the vast expenses and the organization involved in all this. And he goes on to describe other Jewish communities that went ahead and did this. And so we see over here that this May, is Shavuos time, turned into an unbelievable disaster, which is one of the reasons. It's not the only reason. Shavuos has been kind of an unlucky period in Jewish history. That's when the Crusades hit also. And that's why we say Avarachmim in shuls, many shuls, even when it's Rosh Chodesh before Shavuos time, because the Avarachmim prayer was composed for the martyrs of the Crusades. And it happened on Shavuos and the days before Shavuos. And here also, it happens to be, unfortunately, coincidence, it happened on Shavuos as well. And the result was, whoever was able to get away, at least temporarily did. Whoever didn't. Now, the one bright spot in all this was an unusual guy. By then, I mean, the Poles were all busted. They're running away. The great magnates were either killed or fleeing, and they left everybody behind. And the Jews were abandoned by the Poles. The Poles were abandoned by the Polish leaders, except one guy, Prince Jeremy Vishnevetsky. I know it's not a famous name in America, but he's a very famous name in Polish history. Prince Vishnevetsky was the leading landowner and magnate in the region we're talking about, on the wrong side of the river, Dnieper. He actually owned a lot of these Cossacks and things like this. And for some reason, he liked Jews. Right? Maybe because he owned them, maybe for other, but it seems more than that. And the author over here goes and says once again in his very descriptive way, Ba'osa Yom Shenishba on Poland, on the day that the Polish army was defeated and the king died, Kol Medina's Poland Kitzon B'li Roa. All the Poles acted like sheep without a shepherd. They just panicked. And when all the princes on the wrong side of the river heard that the king was dead, that the Poles had suffered such big defeats and their generals had been killed and all their nobles had been defeated and all that sort of thing, Lo kama od beish v'namas kolev Yehudim. The Poles had a complete depression, and they tanked out, and they fled, and that's why the Jews were left defenseless as well as the Poles. V'nosu kol asar motion bosim b'komos Dnieper, that they all fled hakolnos l'nasham. V'luli Hashem hoser lanu sari kamat kistamayinu, and that every Jew in the area would have been killed if not for one guy, this guy. Okay. Asher haya ba'osa Raj, in the midst of all this earthquake, when everybody was panicking, you had Adukas Vishnevetsky, Zecher Lebracha, Imachayel Shalo, with his army. Achari Anar Dnieper, he was the only guy left on the other side of the river, so the Cossacks are all over the place, and he's got the only Polish force. It wasn't a large one. Ohev Yisrael Ad Ma'od, he was a friend of the Jews, a lover of the Jews. V'gibra Mulchama Asher Kama B'chol Haaretz, he was a powerful warrior, and he was one of the great generals. He never was elected the king of Poland because the others were jealous of him. This is all part of your 17th century Polish history stuff. V'hu nos im amo derech eretz lita, and he had to flee towards Lithuania because of the Cossacks coming all over the place. V'nosu imo kachamesh mot balabatim, and he took with him in his area 500 Jewish families. For kol echad im ishto ubanov, there's 500 people with the whole families. He didn't want to happen to them what happened to the others. V'nosa osam kamal kanfei nisharim, and he led them with his own people, like the Bible says about God of the Jewish people in Israel, like on kanfei nisharim, like wings of eagles. Until he escorted them to a safe place, and then he turned back to charge against the Cossacks. It was amazing. He says if the Cossacks were attacking in the rear, he said Jews to the front. Right? And if the Cossacks attacked in the front, he led the charge to the front. So no, it wasn't the Jews, it's the women and the children. It's the women and the children as well. So this person, Prince Jeremy, as they call him over here, becomes a very significant figure over here. And he was the only force that the Poles had on that side of the river to try to hold back this tidal wave of the Cossacks and the Tartars that are sweeping everything and destroying everybody. Okay? Now, at this point, Khmelnytsky was riding on a wave as of success, as I said. He was a very sneaky and clever guy. Everybody in Europe is sneaky and clever. That's how you survive in the 17th century. Otherwise, you don't. And so what he did was that he tried to lull the Poles into a false sense of security. He tried to say, nah, don't worry, this was just a misunderstanding. Things got out of hand. But, you know, in point of fact, I'm on your side, really. The king just died. I'll help you get a new king. You can rely on me and all the rest of it. As he puts it over here, and he knows what he's talking about, he says that, where is it? What we suggest to do to his advisor told Khmelnytsky is Tichta Sorim Aduksim Shal Malchus Poland Dibri Shalom Emes Dvarim Tovim V'Nichumim. Send letters to the Poles reassuring them that the whole thing was just a misunderstanding. He's really on their side. And say, you're very sorry for everything that happened. Things just got out of hand. The party went where we didn't expect it to go, you know. And you only did it because you were trying to save your life. The other nobleman was out to get you. Let's write a whole big thing over there. Lull the Poles so that they won't mass a big army against you. You'll have time to gather your forces against them. This is a political lie. And meanwhile, send messengers to the Tartars that they should bring you reinforcements, and then we'll be able to take out the Poles. Okay? Then we'll be able to go Lios Hasidim Leo Moed, form a plan to attack on a certain day and kill all the Jews and the Polish princes. V'cheinosa. Khmelnytsky took this advice. And he sent two sets of letters, one to his fellow Cossacks and one to the Poles. To the Poles he said, everything's okay, we're going to make peace. To the Cossacks he said, on such and such a day, rise and kill everybody. Now, here again, the guy who wrote the book is a Polish writer, the Nobel Prize winner. He didn't like Jews. Poles, Vishnevetsky liked Jews. Most Poles don't like Jews. And therefore, it was just interesting to me because I looked at it very closely. He omits almost all mention of the Jews in his novel. They don't play any role over here, which is not true at all. But he gets the basic idea, which I hope you'll see in a second, and we know the rest of the story. I'll tell you what I mean. He says over here, here's enough for our movie. The Jews who had lived in the Ukraine, they had friends. Listen, even Hitler's time, not everybody was bad. You know that. There were some people that were friends with the Jews, correct? So here also, in the midst of all this carnage, these guys have their own sources of information. Beryl and Shmerel and Yankel know Ivan and, Zacharias and all the others, and they found out what Khmelnytsky's doing, meaning they said, oh, we got a letter, or we heard through the grapevine that on such and such a date we're going to attack the Poles and hit them a surprise attack and kill the Jews and everyone else. And so the Jewish intelligence service was better than the Poles who had no intelligence service. The Jews had a spy network working to get the information. And they brought the intelligence to the Polish magnates, notice to Vishnevetsky. And the Jews sent out their own Pony Express secret intelligence networks. I'll tell you again, here we have enough material for 10 novels, 30 novels, because this really happened. And that's why the magnates, the Poles, liked the Jews. They liked them a lot, because they were their only source of intelligence. And therefore, the Polish magnates, who ordinarily didn't like the Jews, they just tolerated them for business reasons. Now, you know how it goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they liked the Jews a lot. Because, as this author puts it, he's religious. The Rebbeinu Shalom sent the cure before the Makkah, because the Makkah was coming. If not for the fact that most of the Poles, the Polish leaders, I should say, the great landowners and the kings and all that, like the Jews, then the Jews would end up being crunched by both sides. Okay? That's usually what happened in Eastern Europe. They didn't like him, and they didn't like him, and the Jews were stuck in the middle. Right? In 1939, it's not that long ago, 1939, Hitler kicked out all the German Jews who had Polish citizenship. The Poles wouldn't let them in. They stuck in the middle of no man's land. They died. So that did not happen here. And that's because the Jews made themselves of great service to the Poles. Wherever, he uses the language of the Megillah, that wherever the letters came, the Poles and the Jews quaked, and the Ukrainians were happy, getting ready for the planned day. Okay. Now, the result was that they were not able to. Let's put it this way: he sent all these letters out to them, and he's saying the whole thing was just, as I say, a big mistake and all the rest of it. But the princes didn't listen because they knew that it was all sheker mirma, that it was all a big lie, and what he's planning to do over there, and they were able to take measures over here. Do we have the next piece? This is exactly what, I'm going to tell you what happened, and before you see it in a second, let's stop it just for a second. This is really true. Here's Khmelnytsky's ambassador is going to Prince Jeremy. This really happened. And saying, we apologize, the whole thing was a mistake, and all the rest of it. You and I know what really happened. In this story, they just make it that the prince didn't believe him. The reality is he had been informed by his Jewish agents or friends what was really going on, and he was what they ended up calling the hammer of the Cossacks. That was his nickname in Ukrainian. His theory was, as they say over here, drown the rebellion in blood. Okay? Notice he knew exactly what he was dealing with, and he knew in these parts of the world, you're not dealing with the United States of America. It's not the Democrats versus the Republicans. A fights B, A kills B, or A gets killed by B. That's just the way it goes. And so he is not taken in by the deception of the Cossack ambassadors. You can read the subtitles and see yourself what's going over here. Go ahead. You can play it. I'm asking you to forgive us for what we did. There's Prince Jeremy. Yeah, does it work? As you see, as a prince, he lives like a king almost, with the commanders who attacked our forces, signed by Khmelnytsky, the Cossack leader, the hetman. And there's the prince, and there's the deceitful ambassadors of the Cossacks. You let a Pole go. You understand what that means? Let them feel they're dying, torture them. And he's correct. He says this is all a plan of Khmelnytsky's to lull you into security. Here will be the only reference to the Jews in the entire novel. See that? Escort my wife, the nobles, and the Jews to Zamash, the safe area, then hurried back. Now you understand when he says, we'll make ourselves known in the Ukraine, meaning we're going to kill everybody. So this is what happens. So this is the world in which the Jews who lived in this part of the world had to deal with. All right, now I'm going to try to stick to my time over here. So let me share with you what happens next, which is the famous tragedies. The Jews ran away to two big fortresses. One was Nemirov and the other was Tulchin. These were powerful fortresses. When the Khmelnytsky heard that the Jews had run away to Nemirov and they had a lot of gold and silver and that the city itself was powerful and wealthy and it was a rich Polish city and all the rest of it, so he immediately sent one of his generals, whose name was Kirvanos, with 600 men, Sholchicher, with swords, and he wrote to the people of the city saying that they should be on his side, the people inside over there. And the point is they attacked the city on Chaf Sivan, on the 20th of Sivan. Bo Kazakh and Samach Nemerov, Vayar Yehudim Esegdol Rechem Ba'ilubam. The Jews see the masses of the Cossacks. You'll perhaps see a little bit later what I'm talking about. But they couldn't tell from a distance who's coming. Is it a Cossack army or a Polish army? And what the Cossacks did was they, were trying to do all kind of tricks. And the Jews, as I say, locked themselves up in the fortress. B'd'lasayim brichim lihilachim kenegdam. And the Cossacks did a ruse de guerre, a trick of war, and they put on Polish flags, okay? And the people of the city who were on their side, in other words, the Ukrainians who lived in the town, said, oh, there are Polish soldiers, open the gates. And they came into the gates, and as soon as they did, then they realized what happened over here, and the Cossacks went on a rampage. They entered the city with swords, and with spears, and with pruning hooks, and with sticks, and they killed the Jews right and left. This is the famous massacre of Nemerov. They raped everybody, all the women. A lot of the women jumped into the moat surrounding the city to drown themselves rather than fall in the hands of the enemy. That these Cossacks shouldn't seize them. Many of the men tried to swim. They jumped into the water, but they were shooting at them, and they killed them. Notice they didn't get away. It didn't work. Vayisham Rosh Yeshiva, Kak Nemrov, Rabbi Chiel, Michal, Brabar, and Lezer. There was a famous Rosh Yeshiva there that we talked about last week. All these towns at Yeshiva, where they're considered the Chashva people. So he did call Torah Kul Baal Peh. He knew the Shas and Chochmah Solomon. He knew secular studies. And V'dar Shlem B'Shabbos Shlefnei Agzera. And he had given a speech the previous day with Shabbos, and he said, listen, we might find ourselves in a situation in Kiddush Hashem. He told it to him straight, like it was. And he said, I want everybody to agree that we're going to go down, we're not going to convert. Rather sacrifice our lives. And they did. And he tried to jump in the water and swim away. And he was seized by a Cossack. And he said, don't kill me, I'll give you money. And he took him to his house, and the Cossack took the money and let him go. And he and his aged mother went and hid in another house a day and a night, 2 days later. But then by the end of 2 days, they killed everybody regular, and they started like the Nazis going around from house to house, look for people who's hiding. And so, realizing he's not going to survive, he and his mother ran to the Jewish cemetery. Said if they'll die on a base olam, as it were. And that's when as soon as they got there, one Cossack came there, and he was Topher Minolim. He had been a shoemaker, the Cossack had, and he took a stick, and he, killed him by hitting him and his mother with the stick. He beat them both to death. The mother said she should die first. He didn't listen. He killed him, and then there. And after 3 days of continuous killing, they finally allowed some Jews to be buried or something like that. And he said the interesting thing is that in this massacre and in some of the others, a lot of women, especially young women and middle-aged women, weren't killed. They were raped. They were taken as slaves. They were doing, maybe you might say a fate worse than death. But the worst things they did apparently was to the men. It's their mentality. This is, their idea of chivalry. Okay, and here comes a very famous story that is retold 1,000 times. It's perhaps the most famous story of Zigzeres Tachmatat. Ma'aseh B'riba Achas Yifas Torah, and it was a certain girl who was beautiful, from a Chashva family. And she was taken as a concubine to marry the Cossack. He fell in love with her. Before he could do anything with her, she told him deceitfully, I know magic. After all, the Jews are all sorcerers, as the devil's apprentice, so it's magic. And what's the magic? I know a certain incantation, like the Emperor Jones, can't shoot me. He was impervious to bullets, like Superman. And he said, I don't believe it. He said, you don't believe me? Shoot me, I'll prove it to you. Shoot me with your pistol, you'll see nothing will happen. He was like amazed. He figured she must be telling the truth. Why would she say anything like that? And so he shot her and killed her, which is what she wanted. You understand? And he did a shelo yitamen agoy Hashem yin kodomo. That, as I said before, the whole point is that she did in order that, to Kiddush Hashem rather than fall into what she obviously considered a fate worse than death. Okay. There's one more piece of this, and that's what happens in Tolchin. Maybe I'll save that for next time. Let me just make the following point, and that is that when Prince Jeremy finds out about all this, and he's withdrawn, so when Nemirov is killed, some other towns are killed, and he meanwhile was massing his forces, as you saw, he brought the dragoons back. So Gamadukas Vishnevetsky, Zeichel Brachim Chel B'Mdinas Lito, they were over across the border in Lithuania. Kishishama Davar, when he heard what happened, he was very distressed by what had happened to the Jews in Nemirov, because that was his city. He says, these are my Jews. He massed 3,000 men, and he, swore revenge. And he won't rest until he bathes in their blood. Which, if you see over here, yeah, that's it. From the famous movie, this is true. Here he takes an oath in front of everything that's sacred to him to bathe in their blood, to drown the rebellion. And the Poles love this. This is, I tell you, the Eastern Europe is not Western Europe. Having raised my sword against the roguery. And drown old peasant rebellions in blood, which is exactly what it says in the Yevei Mitzvah. And so what ends up happening is he launches a counter-invasion in which they go town by town, city by city, anywhere they found, if in the town they found anything that had belonged to a Pole or a Jew. In other words, if there was a piece that fell in the town, that's it. How'd you get it? We know you got it. Killed everybody in town, burned down the buildings, tortured them slowly, or roast them over fires. The same thing. You understand? And this is how things were going on in May and June and July and August of 1648. We call this Xeris Tach V'Tat. It goes on for 2 years and a little bit past that as well. So you see that the Jews were living in savage times and savage areas, and they relied, when they could, on outside help. But as I'll try to demonstrate next time, surprisingly, there were a lot of Jews with 22s, as they say. There were a lot of Jews who had guns and were fighters. As I told you before, the type of person who ends up becoming an arrendator, who ends up with a business plan to be the governor or the ruler or the dictator of all the peasants and animals in 300-mile area, is a tough son of a gun. He's not a kollel guy learning a Baba Kama. You don't succeed in being that kind of business manager. It's the same. I mean, I'm going to use an example. The people who get in these, who go collecting in slums and things like this, you have to be very tough, or don't get into it. And so, refined people, and people who are very civilized, don't like violence, and therefore don't walk around with knives and swords and guns all over the place, don't get involved in these business. But Shmerel and Beryl and Yankel that I described the other day, or today, do. And so we're going to see next time what happens when they become involved in the battles against the Cossacks to save their own lives. And the Cossacks will then resort to various stratagems to try to undermine the position of the Jews as fighters so as to weaken the Polish side. So we see that this was a devastating period in history, and a few months before everything had been great. This is part one, and I hope to continue the next part next Tuesday.